Hey there, I'm Electra Mourning and welcome to the Feminist Film Review. Today we're going to take a look at a film called The Fifth Element, and it stars Bruce Willis, it stars Milla Jovovich, it stars Chris Tucker and Gary Oldman, and it is one of my all-time favorite films. So I wanted to do this video in two parts. Primarily because I am a little terrified as to how this video is going to go. So I wanted to share with you my unabashed love for this movie before I get into the feminist criticism of it. This movie is important to me in a couple of different ways. This was, I had been exposed to science fiction and sci-fi in film before and in media before. My parents were into Star Trek, and my siblings were really into Star Wars. So I had definitely seen it before. I had been exposed to it before, but The Fifth Element was really the first time that I developed a love of science fiction and fantasy in film. So it holds a special place for me in that way. And one of my burlesque routines is dedicated to the diva. I've got my diva nails. And I just loved seeing that kick-ass persona on a couple of different ways and illustrated in a couple of different people on screen. So I'm interested to see if reviewing it gives it a new light and gives us a new way of seeing it. So we're going to see how that goes, and I'm excited to go now and watch the film with the criteria that I have set here, my criteria, and I'm excited to see what perspective that takes. A lot of you have sent me the Born Sexy Yesterday. A couple of you have specifically requested that I not look too far into it. I do know a little bit about what this has to do with the movie at hand, but you've specifically requested that I not look too far into it, so I have honored that request and not done too much research. But I do have those links at hand, and we'll be taking a look into what Born Sexy Yesterday has to do with The Fifth Element. So we'll see you soon, and we'll be right back. Bye. Hey there, so it's a new day, and I watched The Fifth Element last night, and I have a lot of questions. I had never thought about this movie this way, and I'm very excited to share what my thoughts are with you. So you'll also have to excuse me. I did a burlesque show in Houston, so you'll notice I'm a lot of it glittery. So maybe you'll enjoy that, maybe you won't, but in any case, it's the way it is, so we're gonna go with it. So the plot line of The Fifth Element, essentially in 1914, this alien race called the Mondachiwan, they come back to Egypt. It's implied in the film that they've kind of always come back and forth. There's this entire priesthood on Earth dedicated to this divine light, this divine race of elements, and this divine life force. So the Mondachiwan come to Earth, and they let us know that darkness is coming, that a war is coming, and that in 300 years, when the darkness returns or comes to Earth, they'll be coming back. So theoretically, this is great. The Mondachiwan are going to come and they're going to help us out. But in this viewing, I become slightly concerned about the Mondachiwan coming back to protect and to save us, because one of the Mondachiwan gets stuck behind a door. And I wonder to myself, if they can't open a door, how are they going to save the world? So, like I said, when I view this movie through a critical lens, I have a lot of questions, and that is definitely one of them. So, in any case, we flash forward to 300 years later, and we see Bruce Willis, and he has just retired from the Army about 6 months earlier, and he's now driving a cab in New York City, and they're not great. They're not great for Bruce Willis. So we learn pretty early that Bruce Willis has recently been divorced, and that he essentially he's waiting for the perfect woman to come along. And a lot of you did send me this research that was done into the Born Sexy Yesterday trope in science fiction. And we'll be talking about that because I did do the research about it, and I have a lot of feelings about that. So I do appreciate everyone who sent that to me. We'll be talking about that, and I will have some links down below as to where you can learn all about Born Sexy Yesterday, and many thanks to Pop Culture Detective, who did such a succinct job of really going and delving into that. So in any case, Bruce Willis is driving a cab, and it's 300 years later, so we're expecting the Montechiwan, and lo and behold, they do come back. But we have these nasty, nasty creatures who, as the Montechiwan are trying to enter Earth's atmosphere, they shoot up the ship. So that's no good. But what it does is there was a survivor. It's kind of this like hand thing that ends up being Milla Jovovich. So we get to see her, and it's still, that scene is one of the coolest things I've seen in film. Her being sort of digitally reconstructed, and their explanation is probably not exactly scientifically accurate, but it's still really cool to listen to. And from that point, Lilu and Corbin, Bruce Willis's character, meet up with the current priest, Vito Cornelius, and they are challenged to save the world by using the 4 elements and Lilu herself, who is of course the 5th element, against the darkness, who is never quite fully defined except by Vito himself, who explains it essentially as wherever there is light, it sort of replaces it. Wherever there is good, it is just pure evil. It doesn't really seem to have any other motivation except to extinguish good. It is just pure, the idea of pure evil. They go and they team up eventually with Chris Tucker's character, Ruby Rhod, and they are charged to save the world. And that is the basic plot line. So let's get into some feminist criticisms. So as we know, there are a set of criteria that I'm working off of for these feminist film reviews. You can check that out in the link down below if you don't remember what those are or you haven't seen those before. But the first one that I'm looking at is how mixed is this cast in terms of male to female ratios. Since this is sci-fi, I had to kind of think about how I wanted to do that. Am I going to presume the gender of these alien races? And so I decided in thinking about that, that unless they give any sort of gender marker to the alien characters or the alien races, I would just go ahead and kind of not presume gender for alien races. And I would love your feedback on that, your thoughts on that. So leave a comment if you agree or if you disagree, you think I should have done it differently. So with the Montechiwan, we did have one character who was addressed specifically as Lord, which is usually a title that is reserved for male characters. With the Diva Plava Laguna, she is addressed specifically as she throughout the film. So I did look at that character as female. One thing I'd like to address is the presumptive masculinity throughout the film. The 5th element was presumed to be male throughout the entire plot, the first half of the movie. It was all male pronouns. It was all, oh, well, he. And I think that this may have been an intentional choice to build suspense, and when we ultimately find out that the 5th element is a woman, to make it that much more of a reveal. And yet I think it's an interesting choice because there were so few women in the movie. There was such a shortage of femininity displayed, and all of the female characters displayed more masculine traits than feminine. Also, along with the presumptive masculinity and some very problematic behavior just in general, one thing I noticed in this particular viewing, which had kind of bothered me in previous viewings, was the genuinely misogynistic reaction to Major Iceborg. That kind of sucked. Like, she was a character, and we wanted to go on this mission to save the universe and save the world, and this woman was going to pose as Corbin Dallas's wife, and his reaction to her was really crappy. And we as an audience member were supposed to know why that was, and yet, as an audience member, I felt like the implication that they were making was really rude. And I feel like the introduction of Lilu to the army officials could have been done much differently, and in a way that made more sense, especially since they already knew who she was, since they helped create her. So there was a lot in viewing this movie through this lens that was a little bit infuriating, actually. So once we actually get to Flossed in Paradise, once we actually get on our way, we meet a character who, when people talk about the Fifth Element, it is probably the number one character that sticks out in most people's mind. The character, of course, is Ruby Rhod. And when we talk about the racial diversity in this film, there are several people of color in this movie. What stuck out to me, however, is that these characters are not in positions of power. Even the president, the president is a person of color. However, he's not in a position of knowledge, and he never becomes in a position of knowledge. He never goes from a person who perhaps doesn't really have all the answers to actually learning. His character never grows, is what I'm trying to say. So really, in this particular film, Ruby Rhod is the character who has, although he has all the qualities of a sidekick, I feel that Chris Tucker took on that role and brought it to life in a way that I don't necessarily feel was likely even on the page. He far and away stood out and brought that character to a whole different dimension. So let's get into Born Sexy Yesterday. This is something that, while it is not at all new, it was given sort of a name, given a designation by Pop Culture Detective, who I'm going to link all that information down in the description. So the basic idea is that a movie, generally science fiction or fantasy, will introduce a character who has the mind of a naive child, but in the body of a full-fledged adult woman. And generally this character is highly skilled, which is part of what sets her apart from like a manic pixie dream girl. And often, like is the case with the Fifth Element, she was literally born or created just yesterday. And so as she interacts with our hero, in the case of with the Fifth Element, Bruce Willis's character, Corbin Dallas, this is literally the first man she has ever really interacted with. He knows everything, or so she believes, because she's never really interacted with anyone else. She doesn't know any differently, and he is the holder of all cultural knowledge to her, and he empathizes with her in a way that no one else ever has, because she literally does not know anyone else. This is problematic on so many levels, and it's really kind of gross, in my opinion, and I have never thought about it this way, and it has a yuck factor that I've just never thought about. So yeah, if you want to be simultaneously mind blown and really icky, definitely go check out all the info on Born Sexy Yesterday. There's a lot of clips about movies like Tron and Splash and Fifth Element. But as it relates to this film, it definitely falls into that category. So for behind the scenes, there were 18 lead decision makers in this film. For more about that, you can check out the criteria down below to see who I define as a lead decision maker and what designates those to me. So out of that 18, there were 5 who were feminist voices, and surprise, surprise, none of those people were writers. There are no female writers on this film. And yeah, I think this is a major problem. When we talk about a film and when we talk about whether or not it's feminist, none of the voices who are writing this content are female. So we're trying to write even a Born Sexy Yesterday woman could still be written from a female perspective. So overall, with everything that we've talked about, with everything that we've looked at with The Fifth Element, do I think it's a feminist film? Honestly, no, I don't. I do not think that The Fifth Element is a feminist film. I love this movie. I think it, here again, the costumes, Jean-Paul Gaultier is such an amazing costumer and designer. The music is wonderful. The visual effects are wonderful. The acting is phenomenal. However, you take a film like this and you ask whether or not it's feminist, you're going to get an answer that you may not exactly enjoy. So yes, I hope that you will stick with me. We're going to take a look at our favorites and see just how problematic they are. Yes, leave your comments down below. Did you agree? Did you disagree? And why? And what other movies should I take a look at? Thank you so much and have a great afternoon. Bye-bye.